Hello, and thank you for checking out this video. My name is Patrick Headley, and I'm with Linux Consulting Incorporated. I'm a database and application developer. I use Windows and Linux on a daily basis, and this is the second part of installing and using Linux for the average computer user. I want to make a clarification that in the first video I called the operating system that I'm demonstrating OpenSuSE Linux, but I looked it up to make sure, and the consensus is that it's OpenSuSE Linux. So that's what I'm going to use moving forward. In this video, I'm going to begin showing you the applications and utilities that install in Linux by default. Let's get started. As a reminder, I installed OpenSuSE with the GNOME, or I tend to call it GNOME, desktop environment, and that's what we're looking at right now. The first utility I want to show you is for backing up your data, and it's called Deja Dupe. In order to start this utility, I'm going to click on Activities, type in Backup, and it shows up as the first item on the list, so I'm going to press Enter, and here we are. Now, I'm not going to go into great detail on how to use this utility. It's pretty self-explanatory, but there are other ways to create backups, and I use a script instead of an application like this. So the first menu that I'm going to show is you first set up folders to save. You can also set up folders to bypass. So if you have a subfolder in a folder that you're backing up, you can specify not to back up a folder. You specify a location, and a location should be an external hard drive or USB drive, and ideally you will keep more than one. And for instance, because I'm running a business, I keep an off-site set of backups that I store in a safe deposit box. And finally, you can schedule your backups, and you can make them run automatically, or you can, back here on the overview screen, just click up Backup Now. If in the unlikely event you do lose files, you would put in the media, click Restore, and you can restore your backups from whatever media you put the files on. Another important thing about backups is after you make a backup, check it and make sure it actually worked. You would be very sad if you had to restore a backup and found out that nothing actually happened during the backup process. Now, another thing I want to talk about is antivirus. You might have asked, well, what do you do for an antivirus software? Some Linux people will say you don't need to install antivirus. I'm not going to go that far, but I will say that I don't run a real-time virus scanner, which helps with performance of the system, but I do periodically run virus scanning. And the software I use is called ClamAV, and I'm going to install that because it is not a default installed program. So to do that, I'm going to click Activities and type in Software. And again, there are different options for doing this, but I'm going to use the Software Manager. Now, the Software Manager in OpenSuSE Linux checks the libraries or checks the repositories first, and then brings up the screen where you can search for software. So I'm going to type in clam, press enter. Here I'm going to select ClamAV and ClamTK, and ClamTK is the graphic front end for the ClamAV command line software. The system's going to show me what packages will be installed. I'll click Continue. The installation's complete. No rebooting. Didn't take very long. And now I can click Activities and type in CLAM. When I see CLAM TK, press Enter. And this is the front end for the virus scanner. Not going to run a virus scan because there are possibly hundreds to, well, I've never seen millions of files, but there could easily be hundreds of thousands of files on the system, and that could take a long time. But what you can do, so just as a demo, is I'll click, see if I'll double click, I will double click Scan a Directory, click File System, which is going to be the slash or the root file system. And then if I click OK, the scan will start. When it's finished, as with all virus scanners, it'll tell me what it found and what it did to resolve any issues. And the good news is, in the over 10 years I've been using Linux, the only viruses that have ever been found are on my servers, and they're Windows viruses. Since they're Windows viruses, they don't affect the Linux operating system, but the virus scan software still detects them, and I can quarantine them or delete them. In ClamAV, you will have to update the virus signatures. So I'll double click on Update Assistant. Make sure I would like to update the signatures myself. You can also select for your computer to automatically receive the updates. Click Apply, click Back. I'll double click on the update icon where it says check for updates. I'll click OK. It's going to download the virus signatures now. The signatures have been downloaded and installed, and a scan can now be performed. So I can click back and then perform the scan a file or scan a directory. In this case, I'm just going to close the application. So with some prerequisites out of the way, let's start looking at other software that installs with Linux. The first is FireFox. Now, FireFox is a web browser. It is a Mozilla product, so it's a leader in web standards. It's secure, and it's fast. FireFox now uses SSL DNS, which means your DNS queries can't be tracked because they're encrypted. Now, I've already changed this instance of FireFox to open on the Google page, but it initially started on the OpenSuSE page. To change it, click on the 3-bar menu, select Preferences, and select Home. And you'll see that I put the Google website in the home page, and actually I did that by looking up Google and then clicking on Use Current Page. When I was done, I just closed the tab and the settings are made. Now there's other settings in that tab, in the Preferences, that you should look at. There's other settings that allow you to further customize the way FireFox works. When you go to these particular settings, you'll receive a warning that what you could do could be dangerous. So I'm not going to show you how to get there. if you're interested, perform a Google search on the additional preferences in FireFox, and there are plenty of pages that will explain how to open those preferences and what to do once you get there. So at this time, I'm going to close FireFox. And the next thing I want to demonstrate is the Office suite that installs by default with OpenSuSE. What you may find with other operating systems is that you get a stripped down word processor and that's it. If you want something better, you're going to have to pay expensive licensing fees. With OpenSuSE and other Linux distributions, you get LibreOffice, which is a full-fledged Office suite. So I'm going to open the word processor. And what you'll see is it's a word processor with plenty of toolbars, has menus, which are redundant with the toolbars, but have things in the menus that are not included on the toolbars. There's plenty of formatting, font sizes, there's plenty of fonts that typically install within Linux install. And if you've used a word processor before, you will immediately know how to use the writer software from LibreOffice. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to open Calc. And you might think Calc means calculator, but it's actually the LibreOffice spreadsheet program. So once again, if you've used spreadsheet programs, you'll recognize this. Again, there's plenty of menu options, plenty of toolbar options. The product itself works very much like Microsoft Excel, if you're familiar with Microsoft Excel. And if not, there's plenty of YouTube videos and support sites that will help you learn and use Calc. I'm not going to go into every program, but I typed in Libre in the search window, and what you'll see is a main LibreOffice like launcher program. You'll see Calc and Writer, which you've already seen, and there's Impress, which is a presentation manager. And then there's Draw, which, as you can guess, is a drawing program. The last piece of LibreOffice that I'm going to demonstrate is called Base. Base is a database and application program. I'm going to open a database that I've previously created, and I named it database. So normally you would see a different name in here because it'll be the name you give your database. Click Finish. And in Base, I created a table. If I click on Edit, you can see the table designer. In Record ID, I made this an auto value field. There's plenty of data types to choose from. And this will depend on which database that you connect to. So in this case, I connected to the built-in database, but you can connect to databases such as PostgreSQL, MySQL, and SQL Server. There's also the ability to index a field or multiple fields in your tables. And in this case, the record ID is the primary key. So once I created the table, which I'm not going to save here, then I opened it and I created a couple records. So we have my name and then John Doe. And as you'll see here, the record ID number started at 0. After creating a couple test records, I created a form. And in the form, you can edit it. So it's much like other editors where you can place controls in the form. So here I have a label. I have 3 text fields, being the record ID, first name, and last name, and I have labels for those fields. In the properties, so here's the property sheet, I specified the data field for the last name, and I also specified the label that is connected to the last name field. So very much like other database products. So when I open this form, it displays the data that I entered in the table. I could have entered the data here as well, and down at the bottom of the form are a set of navigation buttons that you might expect to see. Base forms are based on writer documents. That means there's a lot of integration between the LibreOffice documents. This may be a little different than you've seen with other products, but LibreOffice is not a set of Office products where the licensing was purchased from something else and then they were put together in a package and called an Office suite. LibreOffice was designed from the ground up to be integrated in this way. Going to close Base now. That's it for this video, but there's many more applications that installed with OpenSuSE Linux that I'd like to show you. So keep your eyes open for the next video where I'll demonstrate those. And in future videos, I will also go deeper into some of the applications I've already shown you to show how they really work. Thank you for watching, and look for another video soon.